What's up, welcome back to Nowstalgia. Dave here with a review of Dune Prophecy, the new science fiction series on HBO. Of course, this is the prequel series to Legendary's Dune films, Dune Part 2, one of the biggest and most highly regarded films of the year. Certainly a film that will be in my top 10 at the end of the year, of course. And Dune Prophecy, previously titled Dune Sisterhood, is a long gestating prequel series. I mean, this series was ordered back in 2019. It began filming in 2022, was strike delayed, and of course, this is one of the high profile rebrands from a Max original to an HBO original, just like The Penguin and Welcome to Derry and the upcoming Harry Potter remake series. Set 10,000 years before the events of the Dune films, Dune Prophecy has its work cut out for it to stand up to the sheer excellence across the board from Denis Villeneuve's Dune movies. However, I'm willing to give the show a lot of rope and grace because I love the world of Dune, specifically this version that is being developed by Legendary, and I simply just have a lot of faith in the material. That being said, a prequel set so far in the past from the Dune movies, in this case, the origins of the Bene Gesserit, learning how this order came to control and influence the events of the Imperium in Dune. The stakes aren't nearly as strong, especially because the world seems to be pretty familiar to us in terms of what we understand from the movies. This is a common issue with prequels in general. They are by definition often diminishing returns. However, as a fan of Dune, as someone kind of in the bag for this, I'm pretty excited to continue watching the show, and I thought the first episode was quite intriguing. More so than being 10,000 years before, Dune takes place, and the birth of Paul Atreides and all that. I actually think the fact that we're pretty close to the end of the war on the thinking machines, of course, the world of Dune, they don't have any AI, they don't have any robots or computers or anything because they cast that out in their society after this big, Skynet-esque battle, right? I find that pretty compelling, and it's actually, alluded to in this first episode where the young Princeling has a little robotic lizard that's obviously incredibly taboo and against the law and whatnot. I find that as actually an example of Dune Prophecy showing us something new. I hope we can see a little bit more of that in terms of those cultural attitudes of the world. We'll see. It was also nice to spend time in that bar and just see kind of society on the planet we were on, just because again it's a bit of a different spin from what we had seen in the movies, which are very Arrakis based. In this case, the Dune Prophecy seems to be centered on two key planets. That would be Salusa Secundus, the location of the Imperial Palace, which looks a lot different from the Imperial Palace we saw in Dune Part 2. Again, 10,000 years in the past, totally cool. And then also we're spending a ton of time on Wallach 9, which is the location of the Bene Gesserit's academy. I don't even believe we hear the name the Bene Gesserit in this first episode. Maybe that hasn't come to be yet. They're still kind of nascent in their existence and their in the quest of the Order's desire to maintain their influence and begin this scheme that we know well from the movies of them, intentionally controlling bloodlines and trying to create the master leader they can control. Of course, the central premise of the Dune films, that's still in its infancy in Dune Prophecy. So again, there's a lot of I think intriguing elements to this because I think to most viewers, unless you're a hardcore reader of the Sisters of Dune prequel books, this is pretty new material, even if ultimately we know where it's going to end up in terms of being familiar with the Dune main narrative. So potential across the board, right? I think it's all about execution with this show. I think thankfully that the casting looks pretty good on its surface through one episode. We have Emily Watson as Mother Superior, the head of the Order, the Sisterhood, and she's Valia Harkonnen, and her sister, played by Olivia Williams, is also there with her. I think those are two excellent pieces of casting. Also, for that matter, Valia in her younger years in the flashback stuff, we will be seeing multiple timelines in the show, is played by Jessica Barton, another talented actor. I think that casting really helps kind of command the screen in a lot of senses because they have great presence, and we'll see how the writing holds up on this show. I think the writing was a very consistent strength in the Dune films. We'll see how the series holds up with obviously more hours logged. We'll see in terms of the storytelling and whatnot. But Watson and Williams certainly passed the test at the first episode. You have Mark Strong as the Emperor at the time. Doesn't have a whole lot to do in the first episode. Looks incredulous most of the time. but we know Mark Strong has a presence, so I'm cool with that. I think the most intriguing character to me had to be Sarah Sophie Busnina as Princess Yanez, who is the Emperor's daughter, who has this arranged marriage set up, but is going to go to the sisterhood in the interim because she's marrying like a child. Um, Compelling, and I think in general, I think the strength of Dune Prophecy, in theory, is going to be that palace intrigue, that politicking, that society of the world of Dune and this Imperium. Right? I think that's what we want to see done well, and I think that mixed with the machinations of the nascent sisterhood is kind of the appeal with this show. Travis Fimmel as a Desmond Hart, this soldier who returns from Arrakis. He's going to get more involved in the story, from what I understand, in terms of conflicting with the sisterhood, and there's going to be a lot of undermining of the emperor and whatnot. So I'm curious how that character goes. I think energy wise, Desmond Hart kind of reminds me of a less charming version of Jason Momoa's Duncan Idaho from the first Dune movie. So we'll see how the character makes an impression. Also, we know Mark Addy is on this show as Valia and Tula's uncle. Obviously another Harkonnen. Shout out Robert Baratheon in Game of Thrones. Happy to see Mark Addy back. Also in this first episode, we saw casual, use of spice as the drug, and we saw some sex as well. So I think that's another angle that isn't really too deep in the Dune films. That being said, this is very much still in the world of the film. So you think about the Dune source material versus the Dune we get on screen, the kind of sanding down of the Dune story's relationship to religion still seems to be present. This is very much familiar in every sense if you like the Dune movies. And again, raises the original question of what is the ceiling on a prequel series that is so clearly trying to remind you of its more famous predecessors, namely these two movies from Denis Villeneuve. Remains to be seen. Again, I'm giving this show a lot of grace. I thought the first episode was pretty compelling, especially the kind of shock deaths at the end of this first episode. So we'll see how it goes. But I'm in on Dune Prophecy. Only 6 episodes, so it'll wrap up before the end of the year. I would expect this to get renewed for a second season just because it's a big IP show. We know they're making a third Dune film. It makes sense that Warner Bros. Will want to stay in the Dune business, and they're so about their IP these days. We're going to get another season. Whether that second season ends up being the last season, I think will maybe depend more on the ratings and the reception. But it sounds like there's a kind of soft positive response thus far. I'll be very curious about the watch time on the series. Dune Part 2 was such a big success at the box office, over $700 million for a really hard sci-fi movie. Really impressive, especially because the first film didn't make much of a box office impression due to its day and date release on HBO Max during COVID in 2021. Therefore, what is the ceiling of Dune Prophecy as a series in terms of viewership? The Penguin was a good hit for HBO as a big IP show there. On the other hand, we have seen diminishing returns to varying degrees with Star Wars and Marvel on Disney Plus. So we'll see if this can enchant people the same way Dune Part 2 did. And I think that'll speak a lot to the future potential of Dune as an IP, outside of the realm of Paul Atreides as played by Timothée Chalamet. So certainly intriguing to see how that all plays. But let me know, what did you think of Dune Prophecy? Are you on board like me? What do you want to see next? And for more TV reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time.